Welcome back for another YouTube video. Here's what I got up to in Melbourne with the Marmalade boys. I went with Checkers and Sedgie and looked at some of the footy grounds that are around the St Kilda area, or at least that St Kilda played at. St Kilda started out in the VFA at Junction Oval. Now, it was also St Kilda Cricket Ground, that's what it's also known as. And the Saints played there from 1897 when they joined the league, but they ended up losing their first 48 games, which is just crazy. They weren't the strongest side. You could speculate that they maybe were in the VFA because they had a good ground. They were sort of in the centre part of Melbourne rather than Footscray that was out on the edge of town, but were a better side at the time. St Kilda played there until 1965. By then they were becoming a much better side. And then Fitzroy ended up playing there a few years later. Fitzroy moved in 1970 until 1984, but then they were evicted and moved to Victoria Park for a couple years. Then after that, 1985, Melbourne actually used Junction Oval as a training base. And I haven't really heard much about it. Like, I've heard about St Kilda, of course, and Fitzroy, but I mean, training bases aren't as often spoken about. But the last football club based at Junction Oval was Old Melburnians in the VAFA. They played from 1992 until 2015, and by then the ground was upgraded for cricket, and it's been the base of Victorian cricket ever since. The ground that St Kilda moved to in 1965 was Moorabbin, which is a completely different suburb. It's not in St Kilda at all, but it's not that far away, I suppose. St Kilda moved there, and the very next year they won their only flag, so it was a bit of a good omen. The council really wanted a VFL team in the area. There was a VFA team, Moorabbin, and that team had to finish up because St Kilda were going to play on their oval. The last game was in 1992, and by then St Kilda had some pretty decent crowds there, and they wanted to get a few more numbers, so they were going to move to Waverley permanently. They shared games between the two grounds at the time. St Kilda still trained there all the way up until 2010, and then they moved to Seaford until 2017. They actually moved back to Moorabbin. I think Seaford was perhaps too far out the way. That's even further out from the city than where Moorabbin is. There's actually a pretty good museum there. A very rare piece is a piece of Jack Sinclair's hair. There's also a footy that was kicked 85 metres by a fella named Dave McNamara in 1923, which is a very rare piece of memorabilia to see. Now, not a ground that St Kilda played at, but it's named after a St Kilda legend, Trevor Barker Oval, and this is where Sandringham Dragons play. He was actually coach of the Sandringham Dragons in the 90s and won 2 premierships there, but sadly passed away not long after that. It was originally named Beach Road Oval until 1998, though. It is very close to the beach. It's quite a scenic ground, actually. It's also the home of the Sandringham Dragons. They also play games at Moorabbin. They probably play a bit more at Moorabbin nowadays since it's been upgraded, but the Sandringham Dragons are probably the most prolific team in the NAB League, or the Coates League, or whatever they like to call it nowadays. They have a lot of draftees like the Ashcroft brothers, and they've got a lot of great talent down there. There's a few private schools that they draw players from. It was pretty cool going here because I actually used to watch this ground on the ABC as a kid. Because we get Victorian TV, we could actually watch the VFL games prior to the AFL games on a Saturday morning. And we've saved the best till last, Waverley Park. I've wanted to go here ever since a kid watching YouTube. There was a video called Remembering VFL Park, and this guy walks around an abandoned footy ground. It's definitely not like that today. It's quite well developed. Waverley Park was opened up in 1970 as a neutral ground for the VFL, and the first game there was Geelong vs Fitzroy. It was planned to hold 157,000 people and ended up holding 72,000, despite the record crowd being 92,000 in 1981. They must have jammed people in for that game when they weren't supposed to. I don't know. It was built in what was meant to be the gross suburbs of Melbourne, and I think it eventually became that, but it's not a great idea to build a ground in the outside of the city because all the roads lead into the city. So you have to travel there by car. There was no train, no public transport. They might have had buses going there, but the parking there was infamous because it had a massive car park, and it's just houses now. You wouldn't know. There was actually cricket there as well. The first ever Super Test in Kerry Packers World Series cricket was hosted there. The most well-known game was in 1991. The AFL Grand Final was there due to the MCG having concrete cancer and the Great Southern Stand was being built. By 1993, it was a home ground of St Kilda and Hawthorn, but that would only last until 1999 when the last game was played. Although there were some 2000 pre-season games and some VFL games in 2000 were played there as well. But in 2000, Docklands opened, or Marvel Stadium as it is today, and it's probably been a better ground for the AFL than what Waverley Park was. Although a lot of people are nostalgic for Waverley Park, it's more of a traditional footy oval than what a Marvel is now. Waverley was sold to a company, Mirvac, in 2001, and weeds were growing around the ground. That was when Remembering VFL Park probably was filmed. And it was eventually demolished in 2002, although the main stand still remains and I believe is heritage listed. And Hawthorn still use it. It's actually their current training ground. They moved there in 2006 from Glenferrie Oval. But it won't be for much longer. They're going to move to Dingley in 2026. So it's going to be interesting to see what remains of Waverley Park in the future. Thanks for watching. Let me know what other Melbourne footy grounds I should be going to.